Last 10, stand by. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Former President PNoy Aquino has finally been laid to rest at the Manila Memorial Park, where the public can pay their final respects. Meanwhile, tributes continue to pour in for the former chief executive as the period of national mourning over his death continues. DWIZ has apologized to the Aquino family for the insensitive remarks made by lawyer Leni Gadon in one of its programs. The former U.S. cop who earned the world's ire for killing George Floyd gets 22.5 years in prison. And the country's first ever shipment of Moderna vaccines will be arriving at the NAIA later tonight. Focused and fearless, here's everything you need to know to jumpstart your Sunday. I'm Riza Diaz. Kicking off today's newscast with the Aquino Mausoleum at the Manila Memorial Park now being open to the public until 5 p.m. for those who wish to pay their respects to the former president. This as the late president was laid to rest on Saturday beside his parents Ninoy and Cory. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the story.
More than 100 supporters of former President Benigno Aquino III, or PNoy, flocked to the Manila Memorial Park in Parañaque City, where his ashes were interred. But instead of shedding tears, some of his supporters from far-flung areas remembered the Aquino legacy with gladness. 69-year-old Nanay Rocha said she participated in the first EDSA revolution that toppled the dictator Ferdinand Marcos.
Hanggang sa namatay si Ninoy, dito rin kami sa Manila Memorial. Tapos namatay si Cory, ganun din. Hanggang ngayon si Noynoy.
Research specialist Norby Roquino explained what the yellow ribbon symbolizes.
Kaya kami may mga yellow ribbon kasi ang yellow ribbon ang naging pag-asa natin nung tayo ay nasa kamay ng diktatorya sa mahigit 20 taon. Kaya ngayon din ibinabalik namin ang pag-asang yan.
Mourners were initially not allowed inside the Manila Memorial Park due to COVID-19 protocols against mass gatherings. Only PNoy's family and a few friends were allowed during the interment of ashes. Around 1 p.m., PNoy's urn carried by honor guards arrived, followed by his siblings Balsi, Pinky, Viel, and Chris, and their children. They all wore black with a yellow ribbon pen on their chest. Vice President Leni Robredo, PNoy's cousin, former Senator Bam Aquino, and AFP Chief General Cirilito Sobejana were also in attendance. A helicopter showered yellow petals during the burial service. PNoy was given military honor as former head of state. The Philippine flag was accepted by his eldest surviving sibling, Balsi. The military fired 21 gun salute, while the Bureau of Fire and Protection performed a water salute to honor the late president. PNoy's ashes were interred beside the graves of his mother, former President Cory Aquino, and his father, former Senator Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. 3 hours after the interment of ashes, the Aquino Mausoleum was made open to the public.
Hindi namin sasayangin ang kanyang kamatayan. Ito ay magsisilbing pag-asa sa amin para ituloy ang laban kung saan naibalik ang dangal sa mga Pilipino at mapagsilbihan ng mga namumuno ang karamihan ng mamayan.
I'm Jacob Lazaro and we are One News.
Now, here are other developments following the death and internment of former President Aquino. Several personalities and groups have started honoring the memory of former President Noynoy Aquino by dedicating acts of service to his name. Vice President Leni and her team has started a nationwide feeding program on Saturday as tribute to PNoy. 37 areas across the country benefited from the said program, including residents from NCR, Region 2, 4A, 4B, 5, 6, and 7. Tarlac residents also held the mass for former President Noynoy Aquino yesterday. It was held at the Central Azucarera de Tarlac, a property formerly owned by the Ocoancos. The mass was led by Father Melchor Fernando. And the Senate President Tito Soto has filed a Senate resolution to express profound sympathy and sincere condolences on the death of PNoy. Soto underscored PNoy's notable legacy as a president, such as the Philippines' landmark victory against China in the Hague's arbitration case and the country's remarkable economic growth since the start of the 2010s decade. Recall that prior to becoming the president, Noynoy also served as a lawmaker, first in the lower house and later on in the Senate. We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. Still watching One News Now, I'm Riza Diaz. Here are the other top stories we're following across the nation. Cebu-based businessman and alleged drug lord Peter Lim may have already left the country, according to Interior Secretary Eduardo Año. Lim and his brother were reportedly campaign supporters of President Duterte in 2016. He was listed in the Order of Battle of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency and indicated by the DOJ on charges of conspiracy to commit illegal drug trading. Año says another person with suspected links to illegal drug trade, ex-Iloilo City Mayor Jed Patrick Mabilog, has most likely fled the country. The Philippine Star reports that radio station DWIZ has issued an apology to the Aquino family on Friday. This comes after the quote uncalled for comments made by lawyer Leni Gadon on one of its programs. Recall that last Thursday, on the same day Aquino died, Gadon went on DWIZ's radio program and claimed that the former president had HIV, citing information from a supposed friend. Although it remains unclear what actions the station has taken to address Gadon's statements. Meanwhile, the first batch of Moderna vaccines is expected to arrive at the NAIA Terminal 3 tonight. 249,000 doses of a U.S.-made vaccine is set to be delivered to the country on board a commercial flight of Singapore Airlines. The first tranche of Moderna vaccines were supposed to arrive on June 25, but was delayed due to logistical problems. Now, here are the biggest stories from around the world. Former U.S. cop Derek Chauvin has been sentenced to over 22 years in prison for the murder of African-American George Floyd. Chauvin is supposedly the first white officer in Minnesota to face prison time for killing a black man. Recall that in May 2020, Floyd was suffocated to death after Chauvin kneeled on his neck for more than 9 minutes in Minneapolis. Meanwhile, across the pond, UK
And as a
Health
result,
Minister
I've
Matt
concluded
Hancock
that the proposed
quit
merger
after
does not raise public interest concerns. Since this,
and embracing an aide in his office. Hancock had been at the center of the government's fight against the pandemic, routinely appearing on television to tell people to follow strict rules. With 128,000 deaths and one of the deepest economic contractions on record, UK has been convulsed by the pandemic, and Hancock has been heavily criticized. But Reuters reports that the government has been boosted by a rapid rollout of vaccines, with 84% of adults having had one dose and 61% are fully vaccinated. Despite the improving situation, the revelations around Hancock had sparked accusations of hypocrisy. He will be replaced by Sajid Javid, a former finance minister with widespread government experience but new to health. The Delta variant supposedly depends on vaccine levels of a country. This means that countries with slow vaccination programs must be more vigilant against this highly contagious COVID variant. Johns Hopkins senior scholar Amesh Adalha explains this on Bloomberg.
It's very important to be aggressive with the Delta variant, but it's not something that has the capacity to put our hospitals in crisis. It's going to be a very different flavor than prior increases in cases, but it's inevitable that we'll see upticks in places where there are not enough vaccinated people.
Dr. Adalha, is the sense that the Delta variant is more virulent, that it has longer lasting implications for people who are not vaccinated? What is the distinction of the Delta?
The distinction is that it's more contagious. It seems to be more contagious than any of the other variants that we've seen, and obviously more contagious than the original version of the virus. There is some mixed data on whether or not it's more or less deadly than the other versions of this virus, but that sometimes is something that doesn't pan out when you actually look at the data. But this is something that can take off in an unvaccinated population, and that's why where we have pockets of unvaccinated individuals, it's really important for them to get vaccinated, because the more we're vaccinated in this country, the less we have to worry about the Delta variant or really any other variant.
This has been the message from health officials, business officials, and community leaders across the board. There is a question, though, of how we are recording who has gotten vaccinated and the ongoing honor system that the United States is following. Do you think the honor system is the way to go, or should there be a more formal process of tracking those who've been vaccinated and those who have not been?
Well, it's important to remember that when you get vaccinated, your state, there's an immunization registry, so that's all recorded. That's where the CDC gets its numbers. So those numbers are correct, but there's nothing on your person that you have that really tells people that you're vaccinated. You have these flimsy cards that are really not anything that can be considered an official document. I do think that this was an opportunity early on that the government should have thought about. Is there a way just to have an app on people's phone that tells them their vaccination status so people can trust it? New York State did something called the Excelsior Pass, but it really didn't take off. So I think that this is something we really should see private industry innovating to put your vaccination records in an app. Not just COVID-19, but all of them, I think would be really good.
Yeah, Amish, I think a huge body of our viewers and listeners agree, Amish, with what you just said. And to me, the 2-minute drill is who's going to drive this forward. Are you telling me American Airlines is going to set public policy for America?
I do think it's probably going to come from the private sector, because the Biden administration has said that they don't want to do anything like this. You might see some states do it. The International Association of Travel Agents has been working on some apps. So I do think you're going to see one of those companies come out with an app where they can verify it, and then that kind of becomes the standard.
Lisa, let's go to our other guest here this morning. Jonathan Farrell's been traveling recently. John, forget about it. You're living it. What's it like on an airplane or getting on and off where you don't know if the guy next to you is vaccinated? Full disclosure, folks, Farrell is vaccinated.
Look, I think, personally, Tom, I think it's an absolute disgrace that we still haven't sorted out the travel corridor between London and New York. I think it's ridiculous. You mentioned the private solution. I'm sure the likes of American Airlines, United, Delta would love to sort something out like that from London to New York. The fact of the matter is we're still shut down. It was really interesting to see the president go with his delegation and a bunch of journalists over to London, over to Cornwall the other week, wasn't it? And then go over to Geneva
I mean,
and then we had the theatre of the mask and the elbow bumps in the UK, and then over to Geneva without a mask and the handshakes. I've got to say, Doctor, for a lot of people it's incredibly frustrating, and I don't want to get too personal about the matter right now, but I do want your opinion on why on earth we haven't addressed this travel situation.
It's really mind-boggling. I think now with fully vaccinated individuals, they can go back to their pre-pandemic life. They should be able to travel freely without testing, without quarantine. That needs to be the standard. It's just that these countries are on different timescales, and a lot of them are reticent. Just look at Canada. They will not let Americans in that are fully vaccinated. It really makes no sense to me, and I think we have to start moving past this pandemic, this acute phase of the pandemic, because if you're why did you get fully vaccinated if you actually don't get the ability to kind of have your ability to move around the world back? So I think this is something we need to address, and I know they're working hard to figure this out, but it's going to take some time.
And those are the top stories of the hour. Join us again later at 10 in the morning as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Riza Diaz. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.